quick recognition for our partners in innovation, Cox Business, Lafayette Economic Development Authority, Opportunity Machine, and Rally Marketing. Our next session is about to begin right now. And as our next speaker stated, 2020 is bonkers. She said that in her description, and I really hope she says it again in her presentation, because you can't deny it. 2020 has been absolutely bonkers. I think one presentation yesterday talked about reality being a nightmare. Yeah, you're not going to wake up and it be some other year unless you wait a few months. But 2020 has just been insane, and bonkers I think is actually one of those words where it fits really well, but you don't feel as bad for saying it, right?
Exactly.
So after this year, she knows what it truly means to pivot in times of adversity. Join me in welcoming Laurel Hess, founder and CEO of Hamper, as she brings us along on that journey. Take it away, Laurel.
Thanks. Hey guys, I'm Laurel Hess. I'm the founder and CEO of Hamper. Hamper is an on-demand laundry startup here in Lafayette, and we do next day wash, dry, fold for laundry. So the thing that is second most defining for me is that I hate laundry. That's important for y'all to know because that's what my whole business is about. But the most defining thing is that I love Christmas. I love Christmas so much. 8 p.m. this Saturday, I'm going to pull out all my Christmas pillows and it will be Christmas time on Halloween night. My background is in marketing. Rodney, yes, it's happening. I see that comment. I graduated from Loyola, New Orleans with a degree in broadcast production, and I immediately went into public relations, and I did public relations for Verizon Wireless, American Airlines, Susan G. Komen Foundation, and then I missed Louisiana. I was living in Dallas at the time, so I moved back home. I'm actually from Texas. I moved back home, and I was the sales and marketing manager at the Superdome and the New Orleans Arena for 5 years, where we opened Champion Square. I worked men's Final Four, 9 months pregnant. I worked a Super Bowl. If any of you went to WrestleMania in 2014, you're welcome. I did the bid for that for the city. And after 5 years, I was ready to, kind of have a quieter pace. And we moved back home to Lafayette. That's where my husband is from. Had another baby. And I was working for Foster Marketing, doing oil and gas marketing, before I decided to strike out on my own. And I was kind of doing my own thing. And then that digital agency got absorbed by Rally Marketing. And so I was the president of Rally for 4 years before starting Hamper. So I love to say, yes, we moved here to slow down. And then I just started some companies and we didn't slow down. I hate laundry. I mean, look at that face. I really hate it. And that's probably what led me to, it's definitely what led me to create Hamper. It's a pain point of mine, a personal pain point. I came home from a business trip, and there was laundry everywhere. And we have 2 boys, and we had T-ball opening day, birthday parties. And I was like, man, there's no way we can get all of this laundry done and do the things that we need to do. So I kind of got mad. I realized there's so many apps for grocery delivery and lawn care and home cleaning, but there's nothing for laundry. And laundry takes so much more time than all of those other things combined. So I realized I needed to create that, and we did. It took about 2 years, but we launched just this past January in 2020 here in Lafayette. So this presentation is a little different than what I normally like to do. I like to do really actionable presentations that show you how to do something, give you a wrinkle in your brain, and give you tools on how to achieve something. This is more of an anecdotal story of how I had to take 2 years of information and knowledge and basically throw it out the window and start from scratch. And I'm going to walk you guys through how I did that and where we landed. And I'm going to do the whole thing with its Creek gifs. So I mentioned before, we launched in January of 2020 here in Lafayette. And this was 2 years of hard work, research, finding the perfect pop-up hamper bag, making sure the model was solid, building out amazing technology, this great platform. And we launched in January and everybody was excited. They were like, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? Take all my money. I was at events and investors were coming up to me saying, I want to invest in your company. And we're thinking, oh my gosh, look, it's finally happening for us. There's this golden road just stretched out in front of us and it's ours for the taking. I mean, we were on an upswing. And then March happened. And we all know what happened in March. I was actually driving home from the Baton Rouge launch March 13th when the schools closed. And there was a lot of uncertainty. You know, there was no playbook for a pandemic. It had never happened in our lifetime. There was no, let me read this blog post. Let me ask my advisors what to do. I mean, that was not a thing. I mean, nobody knew. So there was this week or, you know, two of uncertainty of what's going to happen. Is this going to last a month? Is this going to last a year? Nobody knew. But one thing I did know is that busy mom that we spent all that time putting together all that marketing, she wasn't busy anymore. She was at home and she could do her own laundry. So everything kind of got turned on its side. And there was definitely some Kirkland wine ingested during that time period while we figured out what to do next. But when you're in a startup, you can't stop and dwell on the unfairness of it all and why this happened. You just have to move forward and make decisions. So we picked ourselves up by our bootstraps. We looked at what we created and we thought, okay, we don't know when the world's going to open back up. What can we do to safeguard our business, safeguard the tech that we built and the team that we've gathered together to make sure that we can survive this pandemic? Because seemingly overnight, those investors that were super duper interested in investing in Hamper were gone. And rightfully so. I mean, nobody knew what was going to happen. It was very risky and scary for everybody. So we knew, look, we were in the middle of a raise. We have to keep going. What else can we do? We took a look at what we really built. And we thought, okay, we just build a laundry app. Is that all that this tech is good for? Not really. What are we really good at? Well, we're really good at supply and demand. So we're really good at matching up where there's people who want their laundry done with people who will do laundry. So that's supply and demand. That's just basic logistics. We're really good at route planning. We have a really flexible platform. We are really, really good at working well together, and we're really good at working fast. So armed on all that, we had to pivot. I want to say pivot with a caveat because I don't call it a traditional pivot. To me, a pivot is just changing something completely. Well, we weren't going to abandon Hamper, but we knew we couldn't put any more money or resources into it because, again, like mom was home and all this marketing we had, it didn't make sense anymore. And we didn't want to spend the resources trying to decide what that looked like or who it could have been. We didn't want to spin our wheels. It just wasn't going to work right now. Hamper was still getting customers. It was slow growth. It was still growing, but we knew we needed to sort of shift our focus based on all the information we figured out. We were approached by Lafayette General, who said, can you deliver prescriptions? And we looked at the platform and said, yeah, we can deliver prescriptions. So we took 2 years of work and condensed it into 2 months where we pretty much had to back in to a problem from a solution. The solution was deliver prescriptions. We had to then understand the business model and why that would be beneficial. We had to understand the landscape, the competitive landscape, and the marketing and the model. I mean, literally things that took us 2 years with Hamper, we had to do in 2 months. We looked beyond the product, right? We looked beyond what we had actually created and we thought, okay, what is this? This is a flexible last mile delivery platform. It's not just laundry. It's not just prescriptions. It gets things from A to B. So that opens up a world of opportunities for us all of a sudden when we position it that way. We could do so many things with what we've made. And then from that, it was just positioning ourselves because we couldn't come out and say, oh, we're a laundry company that also delivers prescriptions because that's very confusing and very distracting. So we put our marketing hats on and we thought, okay, flexible last mile delivery. We're a logistics company. That's really what we are. We just thought it was laundry, but it was so much more. And then that opened us up to do so many other things. So we positioned ourselves that way. And I knew we had to because at one point I gave a pitch and an investor looked at me and goes, laundry, prescriptions, that doesn't go together and you're distracted. And I was like, no, I'm not distracted. I'm using this downtime to actually do something. This is my defining CEO moment. I could stop and not move forward and I could wait for the world to come back, or I could use this downtime and move forward and try to safeguard the business and create something that was going to help us survive and outlast the pandemic. And that's our COVID story. We just had to keep moving forward. Maybe we were making the wrong decision but we were making a decision and we were moving forward. And I know there were days, especially during the shutdown, when I would just stare at my CTO and we would go, what are we doing? Are we doing the right thing? And immediately we'd be like, well, yeah, we have to do this. We never had a choice. We just had to keep moving forward. And there were moments where, if one of us kind of got lost in thought, he'd say, are you having a despair day? And I'd say, yes. I mean, it's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. And just because Lafayette General gave us an inkling of a solution didn't mean there wasn't a ton of work that had to be done. We had to figure out how to do it. They weren't giving us the keys to the castle. They just gave us a little nudge to look at our product in a different way. And it was up to us to figure out how to model a business based around that. And we did. And I'm super excited because we're going to be launching prescription delivery in the next few weeks. So all of that hard work during the pandemic is going to pay off. And Hamper still is, it's around. In fact, our monthly active users increased 70% from Q2 to Q3. So that business is coming back around. And now we have a really cool healthcare vertical that we've added onto our platform. We didn't just wait. We didn't just wait out the pandemic and not do anything. That's our COVID story. And I think a lot of startups and a lot of people are going to have those right now. And I think it goes beyond just the product itself. This was a defining moment for us as employees, as team members, as people. And for me especially, I had a really hard time with imposter syndrome, and it was real bad during the pandemic. But the key to all of this was just believing in the team and believing in myself. And I have a trick for how I got rid of my imposter syndrome that I'm going to share with you guys because I think it's really important. I think that people my age tend to suffer from imposter syndrome, this feeling of, am I the right person to be doing this? Should I be in this role? How did I trick them into letting me be the CEO? Like, I've never done this before. I don't think I can be trusted. And I think that is also very true for women, especially. But for me, there was a day where I had a really horrible week. We had a video shoot, we had a photo shoot. My kids were out of school because of the hurricanes. One was faking sick. I had to pick him up in the middle of the day. I had a 3-minute pitch event competition. I was pitching in front of 5 VC investors in New York. I was sweating, I was nervous, I was pacing, and I was stressed. And I had this moment where I was like, Laurel, why are you stressing out right now? And the immediate answer was because I care. I care so much. I care about the team. I care about the product. I care about the people using it. I care about our members. I care about Lafayette. I want this to be a win for everyone. And then the answer came to me so immediate of, if I care this much, then I'm the only person that can do this. No one is going to care as much as I care. So I am the right person. And for me, that was the answer. But I think for other people, sometimes it's, well, I really don't care. And then that's an answer in itself too. It just means you need to do something else. So I think this is a really interesting time, as stressful as it is with the pandemic. It is a very interesting time to reflect on not only what you've grown with your business, like the actual product and what you're offering to people, and does it make sense in a pandemic, but personally, you're not the same person you were last year. You're totally different because of the experiences that you had and what you went through with this pandemic. So I think taking the opportunity to reflect and look back is super important, and it's going to help set you on the path of where you need to be. And you're going to feel peace with that, because I mean, I do for sure. And if you don't, then you find me. I'm on LinkedIn, and that is my email address. I will be your hype man. I will be your cheerleader, and I will help you in whatever you guys need. So I would encourage everyone to just take a step back. Let's reassess. Let's use this downtime and this weird period to learn and grow. And that's what we did. And I think that really helped us not only position ourselves better for the future. We have investment meetings already lined up. We may be ready to close our note by the end of the year. We're super excited about that. And I think it's just using the opportunities that you have and just going from there, and realizing that downtime doesn't need to be downtime. You can make it productive too.
Fantastic, Laurel. Thank you so much for that. And I think you've probably made one of the biggest points that I really feel like people, especially during this year, need to hear. Anyone who's trying to start a company, anyone who's feels like they've kind of been thrown into something and doesn't really understand like how they got there in the first place. But it was an amazing point that you made about imposter syndrome, because I know a lot of people that are facing that, especially right now, who have been given a very heavy burden due to things that have happened this year or even beforehand, and don't really feel like they understand why or if they're deserving of being in that position. But it's 100%, even if you don't know everything that you need to know to feel like you earn that position, being the person who cares as much as you do about Hamper and your team and the clients and everything, I think proves that you deserve to be in that position. So first question is, for anyone that poses that question to themselves and realizes that they do not care as much and needs to maybe make a personal pivot, do you have any recommendations for how they can maybe apply their skill set, much like you applied your logistics of Hamper to another business and was able to, kind of not completely pivot, but bring on something else to help make it a little bit more sustainable overall? Do you have any suggestions for people that want to pivot more professionally, but on a personal level?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, sort of how we looked at Hamper and we looked at the product. When we looked at it under the hood, it wasn't laundry. I mean, that was a use case. That was a personal pain point that I had that we were trying to solve for. But the platform did so much more. And so someone professionally isn't just their job. There's so much more than that. So you have to look at what you really, really like to do and what gets you excited and what gets you energized, and then apply that. I think sometimes it just takes stepping back when you're so close to something and you're so close to a problem and you're not happy. It's so easy to see everything in a negative light. But when you take a step back, it gives you some perspective to sort of look at it almost like a third party where you're just, observing. And I think that's really important. People don't take time to observe stuff anymore. It's just, we're so fast paced. I mean, Kelly said it this morning, we're go, 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 go. And the pandemic has really afforded us an opportunity to just slow down. And I think it's going to change a lot of things for a lot of people. And another thing on imposter syndrome, because Rod and I talk about that all the time, his perspective of it is when you feel that discomfort and you feel like, oh, I'm not the right person, it's actually you growing. That discomfort is change and it just doesn't feel comfortable, but it just means you're getting to that next step. And I had never looked at it from that perspective before either, but I just think that's an interesting, in case that speaks to someone more than the passion and the caring. That's another way to think about it.
Absolutely. I've heard that a few times from really, really good mentors, that if you ever get to a point where you're comfortable, for longer than maybe a day, then you're not growing.
Yeah.
And I mean, they call it growing pains for a reason, right? So even whenever you're a toddler and you can tell that your toddler is physically in pain because they're growing, from a mental standpoint, if you're uncomfortable, it could very well be because you're growing and you kind of want to go down that path. So I'm so happy that you brought up imposter syndrome, because that's something that not a lot of people talk about, but I think a lot of people, especially this year, have faced, and it's just, you got to figure out whether or not you care. And if you don't, then you move on to something else.
Yeah.
So another thing, talking about how quickly you transitioned over into healthcare. Did you already know a lot about healthcare when you were making that transition?
No, that's the hard part. It's like a totally different business model. We were doing B2C, helping consumers with their laundry. That's what we knew. That's my world. I've done B2B, but oil and gas. Medical, I mean, the first time we sat down with Cian Robinson to talk about this, he's like, yeah, and this kind of pharmacy and this insurer and this payer. And I'm like writing things down, like, I need to Google all this. I had no idea. And like I mentioned earlier, we weren't really given the keys to the castle. They were like, here's a solution that we need. And we had to back into everything. We didn't know who else was playing in this space. We didn't know if someone was already niching out with hospitals. So it took a lot of research, and we had to do it in a very truncated period of time in order for it to make sense. And I think it's a real credit to how Ryan built the app, because we were able to do that so quickly. Because of how flexible the platform was. And I think a lot of people wouldn't have been able to do that. So I'm really, really proud of the team and how fast they were able to move, and especially with so much fear. And that to me is really important. I have a flag in our office. I don't know if you've seen it. It says, do it scared.
Yeah.
That is the best advice I ever got in my whole life. You can move in fear. And I didn't know that. Fear had always stopped me from doing something. And right before I took a really scary leap in my life, my friend said, well, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah. And she goes, well, then you just have to do it scared. And that was like our mantra for like pretty much the first half of 2020. Everything we did was terrifying and scary.
Yeah. I think, a lot of people, it does kind of, paralysis by fear, but if you can get past the fear, if you can just use that fear to move forward, the adrenaline you get out of it, and the momentum that you then pick up, realizing that you were able to face that and keep moving forward, really helps drive it going forward. So I think that's another really great point. And so tying into the other question where you clearly didn't know enough about healthcare, or at least you didn't feel like you knew enough about healthcare to launch Presto right away. But how did you manage to continue down the path with Hamper, like time-wise? You're still going down the path with Hamper. You're having now to pick up as much information as you can about the healthcare industry to build this new business model. How did you manage that time? And then maybe what are some of your processes for picking up on information as quickly as possible?
Yeah, so it was very difficult. I mean, we were lucky in a way when we decided to do this. It was just taking advantage of a downtime. We knew we weren't going to put any more marketing dollars into Hamper at that moment because we needed all the capital we had to survive. So we weren't going to spend marketing dollars. We didn't want to waste money on marketing to mom because she was home. So that helped a lot. We kind of let the business run, and we had a really good team that was taking care of all the customer service issues so that we could focus on building Presto. So they kind of ran the day-to-day, and we just buried in on all of this research. I mean, any nugget that I would pull out of the hospital or people I could talk to, I'd be like, oh, I need to look into that more. I spent hours reading through CMS articles on Medicare and Medicaid, stuff that I just never thought I would end up doing with my highlighter, trying to figure things out. It was just research. And then validating that research, like, okay, I read this. Does this make sense? And it was a long time feeling uncomfortable with what I was looking at because I didn't want to come across as not knowing something. And a breakthrough moment was when Ryan, our CTO, said, we don't have to be the experts in healthcare. We just need to know what they need and then make that product for them. Like, we're going to give them the solution. We don't have to know the rules and the regulations and all these parts and pieces. We have to know how to get medicine from here to here. And that was sort of a light bulb too for us. So we kind of took a step back and thought, yeah, why are we trying to be the healthcare experts? We just need to be the logistics guys. And so we leaned into that.
That's great. So I think this probably ties in very well with Jessica's presentation earlier. We're talking about you had a team that you felt comfortable with being in charge of Hamper, so that way, you and Ryan and Spencer could then focus on Presto and get that ball rolling. How much time did you spend on, or how much time would you say out of all the time that you spend on Hamper, what percentage of time do you spend on training the staff so you can feel comfortable enough to focus on other things?
Well, the neat thing about a startup is that everything is like the Wild West. And there's no real processes and procedures. So the people that you find to work for you are very fast learners, quick on their feet, and you trust their judgment. That's it. I mean, they could decide how they wanted to handle a situation. They could put on their, what would Laurel hat do? But for the most part, there was a lot of trust and a lot of responsibility, and they pulled it off. I think if you just find the right person and the right team, you don't really have to spend a lot of time training them. You just need to trust them to do the right thing.
Yeah. And I think trust kind of leads into this next question too. So from a team standpoint, or the team's point of view towards you, how do you sell the pivot to your team who thought they were initially going to focus on this idea, but now it seems to be changing?
Yeah, that was, I don't want to say that was a challenge. There were some people who just didn't understand, but I think they kind of saw the writing on the wall in terms of, oh man, the order count's going down. Membership is going down, what's going to happen? And it was scary, are we going to make it? It was almost like a lifeline for everybody. It was like, okay, we've got it. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move forward. And these are the steps. And then you just stay positive as hell, because if you show any crack in resolve, they're going to think, oh God, we're going down. So we just didn't, I maybe showed that to my partners a little bit from time to time, and Rodney, of course, but the team for the most part, didn't see that. They just saw like full steam ahead. We're not going to get distracted. We're just going to keep going. And this is going to help us. We're going to safeguard our business and survive whatever happens. Maybe Hamper comes back, and it did, thank God. The market came back, the members came back. But if it didn't, now we had another thing to transition to.
Sure. So besides really maintaining that confidence, what other advice would you have for, keeping your team motivated and to take that leap with you and shift gears?
I'm super, super transparent, and I love to be vulnerable with people. I think that allows them to see sort of like a peek on the inside. They're looking behind the curtain, and they understand. Giving someone full context into a decision and why you're doing what you do, even when you're running at a breakneck speed in a startup, that's important. You have to take the time to explain to your team why you're doing something, why you need them to do something, and why that decision matters to the business and why they matter to the business. So I'm always very, very open when it comes to fundraising, meeting with investors. Every single person on our team knows exactly what's going on. They know what we've got in the bank. They know where we're going, who we're meeting with, and what that means and how much runway we have. So we're very, very open. We want people to feel like we're all in this together. So I think transparency is key, and being vulnerable. Because there are some days that I didn't have it together. And, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to show a crack in a resolve, but you want to show that you're a human being and then treat them like human beings, because we've all had really hard times, especially during the pandemic. So I think that helped. And they just wanted to feel like a part of a team.
Yeah, that's great. And I do want to remind everyone right now, if you have any questions, we have a little bit of time for questions. So go ahead and put them in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to get them answered for you. I want to pivot back to, or I want to go back to the imposter syndrome discussion. And so what advice would you give someone on how to stay confident or how to come across as confident who is also currently struggling with imposter syndrome right now?
That's hard. I'm not a fake it till you make it person. I've said it before. And I know some of my team at Rally will be like, you say that all the time. But I really, really don't like that idea now, especially being on the other side of my own imposter syndrome. It feels like ignore how you're feeling and tamp that down and pretend. And I don't like that. I think it's a day by day thing. It's like, and it's accepting when you're not confident and just being like, you know what, I'm not feeling it today. And that's okay. And the more hard you are on yourself, I think the harder it'll be to actually come out of it. So accepting that you're going to have down days, bad days, you're not going to do the right thing all the time, and giving yourself grace for that is the fastest way you're going to rebound and get that confidence back.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's some really great points. Imposter syndrome, and I say it again, is really difficult for, I know, a lot of people to handle. And but also, I'd say I probably hear people ask me about imposter syndrome, more from a younger age, really. I find that older people looking to pivot, I think they come in with such confidence already, even if they have not been involved in that new industry that they're pivoting to ever. They're completely coming in with a brand new idea. I found that their confidence levels going into these new ideas is borderline insane sometimes. But with the younger demographic, I find a lot of times that they're coming in with a ton of experience. Maybe their family's been in a certain industry for a long time, or maybe they've spent a lot of time researching it and have some active involvement in it. And they come in, they still feel extremely vulnerable to worrying about whether or not someone's going to shoot down their ideas or not take them seriously or not take them professionally. And I know that, so you mentioned that you were sweating, when you were having to give that pitch to the VCs, so how do you personally overcome that sense of dread when, you're trying to sell yourself as someone who really knows this stuff? How do you overcome that and keep moving forward?
Yeah, that's hard. I think, my feeling on why that is affecting a younger generation more is I think we have this pressure on ourselves to perform because we live in this social media era where everything is so public and we're so used to that. And we have to present this perfect facade of no, look, I've got it all together and I've got it all figured out. And there's people my age that have it figured out. So I should. And there's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. And I don't think older generations have that as much as we do, because we're kind of comparing ourselves, right? And comparison is the thief of joy. for me personally, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. Before I got on this, my heart rate was like 130 and I was looking at it on my watch going, what is going on? And I feel very at ease. I'm in an office I'm in all the time. I've never done this presentation before, but I feel comfortable with you. But I still had this nervous feeling. And the only way I could calm down was to say, hey, this isn't brain surgery. I'm fine. What's the worst that can happen to me? If I fumble, if I mess up, if I don't get my notes right, if I say something wrong or I don't say something, what y'all aren't going to know. Right?
Yeah.
So we take ourselves too seriously. And I think that's part of it. It's like, oh man, this is not life or death. It's just laundry for me. But
yeah. You're so much in the weeds sometimes that you just can't really see it from other people's point of view. And I think that was actually a really good point that Jeremy Bate with 368 Media said yesterday, is that he gets so in the weeds of things sometimes. And he believes that everyone comes into an experience where they already are at a 10 because they've been working on this product or this new service or business for so long. They forget what, the point of view of someone who's coming in and never seen it before has seen. And sometimes it can, while, and his point that he was trying to make was more of, don't forget to check yourself. I think it's also sometimes, don't forget to relax because, it doesn't necessarily look as bad to everyone else as it does to you.
Well, and you're not going to have all the answers. You're going to mess up. Like just that story made me think of something that happened to me at the Superdome. We used to open Club 44, which was in Champion Square for Saints games. And one day me and my coworker showed up and there was nothing done. Usually there's lights on, candles, all this stuff, music. We had to run around and get it all on. And we're like, oh, okay, we did it. Whoosh, but we're so in the weeds. My boss walks in and goes, where's the music? And we were devastated. We were so in the weeds, we forgot the music. But I think that you have to have that outside perspective because you're so in the weeds. There's someone who might come in and have a different perspective. You're going to miss something and it's okay. So I think people just need to not be so hard on themselves sometimes.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just be able to feel comfortable with being uneasy. Because like you said, being uncomfortable means growth. But at the same time, don't beat yourself up about every single thing. Just try and learn from it. I think that's a super key point to make.
Absolutely.
We had another good question that just came in is like, what do you wish you would have known to look out for pre-pivot? The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Oh, man. This is so hard because my failure mindset is so different. I don't look back at something that didn't go right and think, oh man, that I failed. I look at that and go, okay, what could I have done different? And I turn it into a learning experience and I move on. So if you ever ask me if I had any regrets, I'd say no. I just don't. Now there's things I wish I had done differently. Man, that's a hard one. I wish that I hadn't spent so much time in the weeds on some things. I wish that, I had taken a step back and asked for more help. I felt like I needed to know a lot of the answers right out the gate. And it wasn't until Ryan was like, we don't have to be medical experts, that it was like, oh yeah, we don't. And I'd also say the community, especially here in Lafayette, wants to help so much. And there's so many people you could reach out to. You don't have to do anything alone. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, it's hard because you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders and you think it's just you going it alone. And you have to remember that there's other people willing to help you and they really, really want to help you, and just ask. You just have to ask for help. And I wish I had asked for help sooner. And I wish I hadn't realized I don't have to have all the answers and I'll figure it out as I keep going. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be something.
Yeah. So that brings up another question. I know you and I have talked about this before. So in regards to help, right, and mentorship and getting advice from people, what do you think is, or what ways do you look at advice? I mean, you get all this advice coming in sometimes, and sometimes you don't know which to take because it might be conflicting, but you know that this individual is very, very intelligent about what it is they're talking about. You know that this one is as well. So how do you sort through that, and how do you know whether or not you're going to move forward on that advice, or maybe table it, or completely throw it to the side?
That's the ugly side of advice and mentorship. It's so great, but then you're going to get it all the time. I mean, every time I do a pitch, someone's like, "Oh no, you know what's wrong with your business model? You should do this, this, and this."
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's really hard not to take all of that into consideration and feel like, "Oh God, they know something I don't know." And I think it just circles back to that confidence. If it doesn't feel right, like you're doing what you're doing for a reason. So if that advice isn't sitting well with you, you don't have to pay attention to it necessarily. I would argue, though, that sometimes seeing different perspectives, you need to be open to that because it will change the way you look at things. I mean, I was forced to re-examine the way that I approach our go-to-market strategy for Hamper, and I'm so grateful we did because it shifted my entire pitch, and it helped us get in the door to several different investors. But the first time I heard it, I bristled. I'm like, nope, that's not right. That's not what my feeling is saying. So you have to be open to it. But I also think I'm really lucky that I have really great advisors and a support system here. So if something doesn't sound right to me, I will ask other people. I'm like, I'm getting this advice and this advice. Like, what do you guys think? Because I'm not the expert at everything or at most things. So I rely on other people to kind of be a sounding board. And then that helps. It's like, oh, well, this person's saying that because of X, Y, Z. And then you kind of have context around it and you can make a decision then from there.
Yeah. I think that is great advice on advice. Great advice on taking advice, and I would recommend that anyone who's out there, that is really good advice to take. We've got some not questions but comments. Skip Boudreau with a Kitty and the Angels. Definitely no imposters over at Hamper. I completely agree with him. Probably some of the sharpest, most equipped and knowledgeable entrepreneurs in Lafayette. # no sus.
Thanks, Skip. That means a lot.
And Annie Perret said, such great advice, great speaker. I completely agree with you there, Annie. So, all right, so we got a few minutes. I'll leave it open a little bit for a few more questions if anyone has any. But I do think that, some couple things to definitely take away from this was, Laurel's thoughts on imposter syndrome and how to pull yourself out of that, and how to get your team on board with a pivot, and really how to, not take yourself so seriously and how to take advice. I mean, these are all some really great points. So if any of you were struggling to take notes down on what some of the key things would be, I would highly recommend this. And we are also recording this. So if anybody wants to get the recording of it later on, let us know. Or if you weren't able to, if you have somebody that that wasn't able to jump on, we can send that to them later as well. Laurel, do you have any books that you would recommend? This is one of the things where I know it's such a stereotypical question, but it's always one of my favorite questions because I just love to see where people are pulling their inspiration from.
So I'm the weird entrepreneur that doesn't read entrepreneur books. I read for pleasure. So I read a lot of like fiction and things like that. So I don't really have, I love Harry Potter. I don't have like I actually just got a book called Venture Deals that I'm going to be reading. That's how to be smarter than your VC and your attorney. So I'm pretty excited about that because I'd love to be smarter than my attorney. But I haven't read it yet, so I can't really give you a full rundown and recommendation. I did read this book a few years ago that did change my life called Shift Happens. And it really did help shift my perspective and my mindset of, how I can relate to other people and how they're relating to me. It's not all about me. They're not thinking about me ever. And it sounds shitty and it sounds horrible to hear that, but it really does help you interact with other people because you realize that their behavior is not about you, it's about them. And that's a really, really, the faster you can, learn that lesson, the better. But it's been a while. I read that book in 2015, but it's still a really good read.
What was the name of that book again?
It's called Shift Happens.
Yes, that is a great book. I remember a couple of friends of mine telling me about that they read that as well, and it's on my list to read as well. All right, so we didn't get any more questions, so I think that means that you covered everything. Laurel, you've done a fantastic job. Thank you so much for jumping on and taking your time out of your busy schedule to deliver some great content to our attendees today.